I've always noticed this saying, you can't see it, but on top of that building it says, Freemasonry builds its temples among the nations and in the hearts of men. That's a Masonic temple.
Stand by, going to air.
Stand by film.
5,
Stand by music.
4,
Stand by announce.
3, 2, 1.
And fade up.
Geritol presents the exciting quiz program 21.
Give me the name of the explorer who discovered Mozambique.
Vasco da Gama?
Correct for 10 points. This temple is an underdog. You know, people root for that.
Sure, wasn't Herbie terrific?
Have you seen the ratings?
I'd like you to meet next week's challenger, Charles Van Doren.
Oh.
How much they pay instructors up at Columbia?
$86 a week.
Do you have any idea how much Bozo the Clown makes?
Gotta be James J. Braddock.
Correct, you have 21.
This guy a natural or what?
He's a natural.
$20,000.
What if we would ask you questions that you know?
Well, I think I'd really rather try to beat him honestly.
Just an idea.
Was that part of the test? Yes, I know his name. Halleck, General H.W. Halleck.
You have 21.
I'm constantly amazed at the facts these guys have at their fingertips.
It's been 9 weeks now.
And you've won how much?
$93,000.
Sir, I smell something. That little box in your living room is plugged into something crooked.
You lose when I tell you to lose.
Now I'm supposed to take a dive?
You know, you got these crackpots coming out of the woodwork. You don't have a shred of concrete evidence.
Young man, I am the president of the National Broadcasting Company.
I have you.
And why are you the one that's sweating?
Let him out, boys.
Charles Van Doren hails from one of the most prominent intellectual families in this country.
Dick's on a witch hunt. He thinks 21 is rigged.
Is it?
You should see the letters I get. Kids are excited about learning.
You set a real example for all us boys to look up to.
Just sign this statement.
Sign the statement, Herb. Sign the statement. Who cares if it's true, huh?
Pick.
Dan.
If someone offered you all this money, would you do it?
No.
And I would.
Professor, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask for your answer.
These things have I spoken unto you, that in me might have peace. In the world you shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world.
I just want to clarify to everybody, I put things like this out so that you'll know that there is going to be no help coming from anywhere in the social political realm. The only help, the only chance, the only way of salvation is going to be in, by, and through Jesus Christ. It's going to get real. You're going to have to get real. And God's people are going to have to get real. We're all going to have to get real. And we're going to have to get real with a God who is real, and to whom we will all have to get real with.
It doesn't take much of a scientist. It doesn't take much of a meteorologist to realize what's next. The sun is setting. And as I take a look at that, and I realize of what's coming, folks, something big is approaching. Just as the sun is setting and the moon is coming out, something big is coming. And I feel it deep within my bones that most people aren't ready.
All buildings in this area must be evacuated now. All buildings in this area must be evacuated now. If you can hear this message, evacuate now. If you can hear this message, evacuate now.
The dark winter came after the first pandemic, and while everybody was paralyzed from fear of the virus, we had something far greater that we were unprepared for. Cyber Polygon was the largest cyber attack ever to be executed. The world's internet was collapsed intentionally, and all of our rights to information were cut off. Banking, medical records, all databases were heavily attacked. Power grids were shut down, businesses were finished. Economies collapsed, forcing us closer and closer to the Great Reset. Most were not prepared for this annihilation, and were now frozen within the illusion of democracy. The puppets performed on stage, while we watched impassively. We had entered the dark winter without any awareness. When the attack finally came, it moved at lightning speed. The military were brought in to keep order on the streets, to assist the understaffed police. With the huge cut in funding, institutions broke down, resulting in a worldwide loss of confidence in government. People fought amongst themselves, and countries were close to a civil war. Many people died due to the civil unrest, and the casualties were out of control. The world was in a state of international emergency.
You had to fight for yourself over those years. Economies had fallen, and unless you were self-sufficient, obtaining food was difficult. People had relied so much on the old system that when the rug was pulled from under our feet, we didn't realize what had happened. We were not prepared for those months. They had brought the attack forward as the few of us who had awoken started to reveal the mechanics to this evil. The algorithms inside the control rooms had told them that they had to attack us now. People's stupidity and denial of truth kept the majority running in the gerbil wheel. Most just fell into an even deeper sleep. We had fully immersed ourselves into their narrative, digesting and living the script they had planned for a very long time. So many just blindly followed, lost in a heavy, suffocating, all-encompassing darkness. They created the money, they created the problems. They then created a solution that only limited us further. They used the excuse that the money isn't available to solve those problems, so we ended up caught in a whirlwind of dramas. The creators of that money wanted control of our consciousness, and they would do everything to stop us.
Since the dawn of the corona crisis, we have been told over and over that the world has changed forever.
What we're going to have to figure out, and I think what we're all going to have to figure out together, is what our new normal looks like. Our new normal includes physical distancing from others. Our new normal includes wearing masks where appropriate. Our new normal includes us knowing where this virus is each and every day, where we live, where we work, where we want to travel.
What we've gone through and the challenges that I'm sharing with you really is Arizona's new normal, and it's our new normal for the foreseeable future. I really want to ask people to get their heads around that.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
This new normal with which we are being threatened brings with it great uncertainty. Uncertainty over work, uncertainty over travel, uncertainty over what our lives will look like on the other side of this great reset. But there is one thing that we can be certain about. If the Gateses and the Faucis and the representatives of the international medical establishment get their way, life will not return to normal until the entire planet is vaccinated against SARS-CoV-2.
It is fair to say things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world.
Realistically, COVID-19 will be here for the next 18 months or more. We will not be able to return to normalcy until we find a vaccine or effective medications.
The hard fact is, until we find a vaccine, going back to normal means putting lives at risk.
This will be the new normal until a vaccine is developed.
As I said, normal it will not be, at least until we had herd immunity and we have a vaccine.
So if we get the overwhelming majority of people taking the vaccine, and you have on the one hand an effective vaccine, on the other hand a high degree of uptake of the vaccine, we could start getting things back to relative normal as we get into the second and third quarter of the year, where people can start thinking about doing things that were too dangerous just months ago.
The only thing that will really allow life as we once knew it to resume is a vaccine.
This message has been repeated so frequently and so consistently by public health officials, political leaders, and media commentators that many have begun to believe it. And now, the public is being prepared for an unprecedented global vaccination campaign, taking the form of a military operation.
It is this effort that I can look you in the face and say to you, EUA comes, 24 hours later, vaccines will be distributed out to the American people and be ready for administration.
The plan is to rush a new generation of experimental vaccines to market and deliver them at warp speed before any long-term testing has even been attempted. What many do not yet understand, however, is that the vaccines that are being developed for SARS-CoV-2 are unlike any vaccines that have ever been used on the human population before. And, as radically different as these vaccines appear, they represent only the very beginning of a complete transformation of vaccine technology that is currently taking place in research labs across the planet.
And meanwhile, they share with us that we must trust the science. And they continuously tell you trust the science. Put your faith in the science, yet they don't even trust in the science themselves, for you see, you can't sue Pfizer or Moderna.
You're looking at video of Sandra Lindsay, an intensive care nurse receiving the first vaccination at Long Island Jewish Medical Center in New York.
The U.S. began vaccinating the population against the coronavirus in December of 2020. The goal is to get the COVID vaccine to every person in the U.S. who wants one, but survey data shows that nearly 40% of the U.S. population doesn't want it. Widespread mistrust might have something to do with the fact that if anything goes wrong with the vaccine, the drug makers that produce them aren't responsible.
This is a remarkable circumstance. It's certainly not like anything anybody's ever seen before.
That means that companies like Pfizer and Moderna have total immunity against lawsuits related to injuries resulting from taking the COVID vaccines. Meanwhile, employers are legally allowed to require employees to get immunized against the virus.
Requiring a vaccine is a health and safety work rule, and employers can do that.
Ultimately, if we want any chance at returning to life as normal, mass vaccination is going to be critical. So how do you convince the public to take a vaccine made in record time using technology that's never before been licensed? And is anyone to blame if something goes wrong?
I thought they trusted in science. If they would trust in science, then they would back up their product. Because according to them, you can't deny science. Well, they surely don't believe in their own science. For if you take that vaccine and you get wounded and you have a side effect, you cannot sue anyone. It's all on you. Pfizer gets immunity. You get persecution in the workplace.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And you know, this is interesting. So many people are already talking about this. And the big question everyone has, can employers require their employees to have the vaccine before coming back to work?
And the answer to that question is generally speaking going to be yes. Because employers set the terms and conditions of employment, employers are going to be able to require that their employees get the vaccination.
But that word of, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. It gives me comfort. It reminds me that there is a God up there that knows that these things were to pass and know that you were going to be alive in this specific generation to witness these types of leaders. Dr. Birx indicated that you couldn't do anything through Thanksgiving, and she was stern on it. She said you need to stay home, period.
Well, no Thanksgiving with extended family members here in Utah. That's a new recommendation from Dr. Deborah Birx, White House Coronavirus Task Force Coordinator.
Brian Malahy had another exclusive local interview with her today. Is her recommendation through Thanksgiving only, or is she talking into Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's?
Well, it's beyond Thanksgiving, and wait till you hear how far beyond. Also, what the governor says about this idea.
I'm really asking the people of Utah for the next 30 to 60 days to really follow these guidelines, which includes not gathering outside your extended household.
In my interview with her today, Dr. Birx seemed to fully grasp what a big request that is.
And I know there's a lot of extended households in Utah.
In the face of soaring COVID numbers, Birx called this the moment to protect loved ones.
We need to protect them now because the vaccine is coming.
So no gatherings with extended family members is your recommendation through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, through New Year's.
Until we can show that Utah is flattening the curve.
And what do we see from this leader? This one of the biggest leaders in the country that has advocated for businesses shutting down, for people to stay home, for travels to be banned. She didn't obey her own regulations. While she was telling you to stay locked down, she was out there eating that turkey in different people's homes. While you're over there stressing in your house without being able to see your family, she's not obeying the rules that she puts upon you.
Right before Thanksgiving, health officials were warning everyone to stay home for the holidays and limit family gatherings to avoid spreading the virus. Now we're learning Dr. Deborah Birx traveled out of state over Thanksgiving weekend with 3 generations of her family from 2 separate households, disregarding her own advice. Well, Kane is a co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, and he joins us live here in Studio J this morning. Happy holidays to you. Well, good to see you.
Good morning. Merry Christmas.
So is this just the latest round of hypocrisy? Rules for thee, not for me, because she traveled to her home. She said she was going there to winterize it, I believe was her explanation. But still, members outside of her own household, 3 generations, 2 different families.
Stunning, isn't it? It's stunning, though, not because of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy and politicians go hand in hand. That's coffee and donuts. Yes, we should be outraged about hypocrisy, but it's all too common. Whether or not it's Gavin Newsom or Eric Garcetti or the mayor of Denver or the mayor of Austin, it's just all too common. What's stunning, Sandra, is what it reveals. I think it just reveals an absolute disdain for the average common American out there that they send messages to. Americans out there right now whose businesses are being shuttered, their livelihoods being lost, they're saying goodbye to loved ones in the hospital without even able to go into the hospital. Think of the cost the average American is paying while the rule makers, the lecturers, the elites do not abide by these rules. I think what's stunning is the absolute disdain it shows for the American people.
This is tough, and you've had a long list of Democratic lawmakers that have been accused of hypocrisy because so many of them laying down these really tough restrictions. But here's Dr. Birx inside of obviously the COVID team at the White House, and she very clearly laid out her own advice right before Thanksgiving. I'm just wondering, what are they thinking?
And to continuously tell you trust the science. Put your faith in the science, yet they don't even trust in the science themselves.
You know what this is? It's an experiment in whether people will listen to scientists.
That's what it is.
That's what this is. I tweeted a couple of weeks ago. I said, I wonder what anti-vaxxers would say to a coronavirus vaccine. Are they going to stick up? I'm not going to do that. It's okay. All right, that's how you're going to play this?
Sir, I smell something. That little box in your living room is plugged into something crooked.
He hated it. Said he wanted this stuff.
100 years ago, a new theory about human nature was put forward by Sigmund Freud.
The Royal Road to the Unconscious.
This is the story of how Sigmund Freud's ideas about the unconscious mind were used by those in power in post-war America to try and control the masses. Politicians and planners came to believe that Freud was right to suggest that hidden deep within all human beings were dangerous and irrational desires and fears.
In the modern era, the social engineers have employed psychologists and public relations specialists to aid and train their agents nested in the information and opinion-shaping apparatus of standardized education, entertainment, and corporate media. Theirs is an approach which has jettisoned the biblical idea of man as a living soul, to whose higher essence an educator appealed, on the basis of truth and understanding the world around him, in favor of ideas given legs by Darwinian evolutionary theory, that man is just matter, mere animal, and like an animal, can be conditioned to accept the world fabricated for him by those who would control him, by appealing to all the lusts, impulses, and insecurities of his natural self. Essentially, they build a cage to his liking that he sees as the extent of the world around him and grows dependent upon. This natural self that is appealed to is what Christians would call the fallen nature. Of course, this method of conditioning works, and that no one has to teach anyone how to follow their self-centered wants. The challenge is always to the opposite, as any parent knows.
Those in power have used Freud's theories to try and control the dangerous crowd in an age of mass democracy. At the heart of the story is not just Sigmund Freud, but other members of the Freud family. Freud's American nephew, Edward Bernays. Bernays is almost completely unknown today, but his influence on the 20th century was nearly as great as his uncle's. Because Bernays was the first person to take Freud's ideas about human beings and use them to manipulate the masses. He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses.
Social conditioning demonstrated as a marketing strategy makes a convincing argument to men of business and government who profit from its effects by monetary gain and accruing and maintaining power and control over their political and consumer bases.
At the heart of the story are Sigmund Freud's daughter Anna and his nephew Edward Bernays, who had invented the profession of public relations. Their ideas were used by the US government, big business, and the CIA to develop techniques to manage and control the minds of the American people. Those in power believed that the only way to make democracy work and create a stable society was to repress the savage barbarism that lurked just under the surface of normal American life. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today.
Edward Bernays, nephew of Sigmund Freud, was called the father of public relations. He has been lauded in the annals of history for basically teaching the affluent how to manipulate people into accepting what they would otherwise reject, were they educated according to truth and biblical principle. What he had to say in this early 1980s interview is very telling. Note that he is a very charming and self-assured man, as are all the great deceivers. But notice further that the audience laughs. They laugh at the naivete and gullibility of their ancestors to be so easily hoodwinked. Yet, are they not also laughing, even if unknowingly, at themselves? Are they not laughing harder still at us?
My next guest is a truly fascinating gentleman. He happens to be 93 years old, and he is the father of public relations. In the course of his 70-year career, some of his clients have been Presidents Wilson, Hoover, Coolidge, and Eisenhower, Thomas Edison, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Enrico Caruso. It's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Edward Bernays. Hi, Doctor. Good to see you. Come on up over here. There you go. Have a seat right here. Thank you very much for being here. I mentioned to the people how old you were. I hope you don't mind me telling them that. And what kind of a doctor are you? What are we dealing with here? You're the father of public relations.
What we're dealing with really is the concept that people will believe me more if you call me doctor.
Oh, I see. That's a good idea. Let's talk a little bit about public relations. You've been doing it for 70 years. Who were some of
72.
72. Who were some of your early accounts? Who were clients of yours back in the very beginning?
In the very beginning, Procter & Gamble was one of our accounts. Mm-hmm. They had a white floating soap called Ivory soap.
Right. That was the selling point. It would actually float in the bathtub or wherever you were bathing, I guess.
That's right. And they came to me one day and said that mothers washed the faces of the children, and they hated soap because their eyes were stinging from the soap, and that when people grew up they wouldn't use any soap, right, because they get conditioned in childhood, according to Freud, my uncle.
So you get ahead of yourself, but it's true, your uncle was Sigmund Freud.
And so we made a research, made a study, and we found a sculptor, Brenda Putnam, who used soap instead of wax in developing her sculpture. Mm-hmm. And it then occurred to me that if we could develop soap sculpture competitions, I went to a psychologist and he said every child has a creative instinct. If we got some sculptors to be judges and had soap sculpture competitions for children in different age groups,
that would get them accustomed to using the soap.
That would get them to love soap.
Did it work?
Not only accustomed to it. The fascinating thing to me was that after the first year, 22 million children were loving soap, and the sale of soap just went up.
Well, if you say so.
This is a matter
of record. We could probably chart that.
Dow Jones reports. Yeah. You can look them up if you want.
In the introduction here, I mentioned some of your clients have been past presidents. Eisenhower, Coolidge, Hoover, Wilson. Which one of those people really was in desperate need of your services? Who was the dullest of the bunch that you handled? Who was?
Well, let me quickly tell you the Coolidge story. Harding had died, Coolidge became president, and Coolidge was running for president. He decided to be president. And Alice Roosevelt Longworth, who was the daughter of Theodore Roosevelt, had started a bon mot of a few words that went around the country as if by radio and by Letterman TV. And they called on me and said, we're worried that this may defeat Coolidge. Well, the phrase...
she was sort of bad-mouthing the candidate, in other words.
That's right.
What was she saying? Do you recall? Was she...
Oh, yes. She said that Coolidge had been weaned on a pickle.
Oh, yeah. That'll tip an election just like that. If word of that gets out...
So, I agree with you, because...
So now you were called in. You have to offset this man had a very dour image.
That's right.
Okay, now what did you do for Calvin?
I never use the word image because image is shadow. I use the word reputation or identity.
Okay, what did you do for his identity?
So I decided first that we should bring down Fannie Hurst Edna Ferber and other women writers of the period. And then I thought it would be a good idea to bring down some ecstatic dancers.
Ecstatic dancers.
Like the Dolly Sisters.
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
I don't remember the Dolly. I've heard of them, but I never saw them.
And Al Jolson.
Entertainers, well-known figures of the day.
And 40 others. And at that time, anybody who was on the stage was a little bit off color. And Coolidge had breakfast with them, and when Slemp, his secretary, came up to him and said, "There's a cabinet meeting going on and they need you, Mr. President," he said, "I'm busy." And he got elected.
So this was to show that he was a regular sort of guy.
That's right.
All right.
And it did.
This sort of conditioning of public perception, which is ultimately a means to get people to love their sin and their spiritual, mental, and physical slavery to those given power in this world by the devil, goes on to this day and has become ever increasingly sophisticated and all-pervasive. However, there is a slight twist to the modern application of these conditioning methods. Instead of controlling man through repression of certain tendencies of the self, the devil has seen it far more useful and effective to encourage the expression of the self. An expression of the self that sees itself as free and liberated from all constraints, particularly biblical morality according to the eternal law of the living God, and to control man through guiding that expression toward that which is superficial and built upon the natural impulse towards self-centeredness and self-worship, and all the lies, filth, and greed inherent to such a mindset. This control is slavery by consent. Consent by the enslaved themselves. Man today is encouraged to do you and follow your heart, whereas following God would entail self-control. The devil, as the great counterfeiter, counterfeits godly self-control by encouraging the self to think it is merely expressing itself free and unfettered, when in fact it is merely following the world into depravity and the sure chains of spiritual enslavement to self, Satan, and sin.
But the Freuds were about to be toppled from power by opponents who said they were wrong about human nature. The inner self did not need to be repressed and controlled. It should be encouraged to express itself. Out of this would come a new type of strong human being and a better society. But what in fact emerged from this revolution was the very opposite. An isolated, vulnerable, and above all greedy self, far more open to manipulation by both business and politics than anything that had gone before. Those in power would now control the self, not by repressing it, but by feeding its infinite desires.
Don't settle for anything less than you can be. Make your life a masterpiece.
You're moving through a world in which everything is possible and nothing is beyond you.
This is the story of the rise of an idea that has come to dominate our society. It is the belief that the satisfaction of individual feelings and desires is our highest priority.
Today we're going to tell you how to get whatever you want.
I wanted to live a different life that wasn't available to me in the image I was born.
I am here, look at me, notice me.
Previous episodes have shown how this rise of the self was fostered and promoted by business. They had used the ideas of Sigmund Freud to develop techniques to read the inner desires of individuals and then fulfill them with products. This final episode is about how that idea took over politics. It tells the story of how politicians in both America and Britain turned to these techniques to regain power. They believed that they were creating a new and better form of democracy, one that truly responded to the inner feelings of individuals. But what the politicians didn't realise was that the aim of those who had originally created these techniques had not been to liberate the people, but to develop a new way of controlling them in an age of mass democracy.
battle is always for the mind. Truth versus deception achieved through manipulation of man by his fallen nature. Remember that animation, I Pet Goat by Haliafon? Created quite a clamor in the truth community when it was released in 2012. It is widely seen, and rightfully so, as an artistic rendering of the vision of the forces driving this world toward a one-world Antichrist kingdom. Curiously enough, it shows the United States flag tearing in half and whipping away in the drafts of a dark winter. Know that that was not Christ depicted riding on the skiff of the Egyptian god Anubis, who it was said guided the dead into afterlife. That was Antichrist. His world will not be the utopia those deceived by him envision it to be. I Pet Goat shows how and by what physical and spiritual forces the new world of man's envisioned utopia will be achieved. Yet it makes no illusions as to the fate of most who have inhabited the old world. It shows such a man as those who will go along with the agenda we now see unfolding under the guise of a global pandemic and will be deceived by the Antichrist and take the mark of the beast, as those held in captivity as pet goats. Their captivity assured by their inability to see it for what it is and by their acceptance of it and dependence upon it as mere mind-controlled animals. Pet goats kept and managed by their overlords. An animal-robot hybrid. Not I, robot, but I, pet goat. I'm going to read the following straight from Wiki. Not because I see Wiki as anything other than a status source, but precisely because Wiki is a status source. And yet, they just render the following so beautifully, so straight to the point. Psychological operations, United States. Psychological operations, or PSYOP, are operations to convey selected information and indicators to audiences to influence their emotions, motives, and objective reasoning, and ultimately the behavior of governments, organizations, groups, and individuals. The purpose of United States psychological operations is to induce or reinforce behavior favorable to U.S. objectives. They are an important part of the range of diplomatic, informational, military, and economic activities available to the U.S. They can be utilized during both peacetime and conflict. There are three main types: strategic, operational, and tactical. PSYOP can encourage popular discontent with the opposition's leadership and, by combining persuasion with a credible threat, degrade an adversary's ability to conduct or sustain military operations. They can also disrupt, confuse, and protract the adversary's decision-making process, undermining command and control. When properly employed, PSYOP have the potential to save the lives of friendly or enemy forces by reducing the adversary's will to fight. By lowering the adversary's morale and then its efficiency, PSYOP can also discourage aggressive actions by creating disaffection within their ranks, ultimately leading to surrender.
We're seeing record high cases, deaths, and hospitalizations in the U.S. right now, and those numbers are climbing. How bad do you expect things to get over the next 3 or 4 months before the vaccine is widely available?
Well, sadly, the next 4 to 6 months could be the worst of the epidemic. If we would follow the rules in terms of wearing masks and not mixing, we could avoid a large percentage of those deaths. So in the near term, it's bad news. But the thing that's surprised me is that the economic impact in the U.S. and around the world has been much greater than the forecast that I made 5 years ago.
These vaccines were created and tested in record time, under a year. According to the data right now, they have a very high effectiveness, more than 90%. Do you think one of these vaccines is better than the other?
No. The data on Moderna and Pfizer look very similar. I'm super happy with all of these vaccines. We should all look at what we have learned from this epidemic, because there will be another epidemic coming. There will be another epidemic coming. And whatever that administration is, being smart about getting the testing up fast, allowing the CDC, who are the experts, to give the message to the public, not being afraid of bad news, so that we get people ready. That it's pretty clear we're going to be smarter next time.
I hope so. But let's talk about that pandemic in the future.
First, we will introduce new restrictions in the most affected areas.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson on Saturday imposed tighter restrictions on millions of people in the UK and drastically scaled back plans to ease restrictions over Christmas. The number of COVID-19 cases in England has soared in the last 2 weeks because of a variant of the virus, one that scientists say is up to 70% more transmissible. Even though Johnson and his scientific advisors believe vaccines will still be effective and the new strain is not more deadly, he said urgent action was needed.
Given the early evidence we have on this new variant of the virus, the potential risk it poses, it is with a very heavy heart, I must tell you, we cannot continue with Christmas as planned. In England, those living in Tier 4 areas should not mix with anyone outside their own household at Christmas.
London and southeast England, about a third of the country's population, will now be placed in a new Tier 4 level of rules, requiring people to stay at home except for essential reasons such as work. Non-essential retail and indoor entertainment will close. Social mixing will be limited to meeting one other person in an outdoor space.
We got you for a safe show, screwed down, you do just what we say. We gonna fix you up right, we got that vaccine, we gonna vaccine you right back to normal. You gonna get back to normal with this here vaccine, I tell you. It's the only way. It's the best thing for you. It'll fix everything that's wrong with you. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm vaccinated.
It is a very good day, Matt Hancock, and you have every reason to smile. I mean, Margaret Keenan is a pioneer, isn't she?
It's just wonderful, isn't it, watching the images of Margaret, and then I've seen a few others. William Shakespeare, the second person. William Shakespeare. It looks such a small thing, just having that jab in the arm, but it means so much, because this is the route out of this pandemic, and by God, we need one. To have this moment showing the way out is just absolutely fantastic.
It is an international collaborative effort, though, isn't it? Because this is a US pharmaceutical company. The scientists behind it were Turkish immigrants to Germany. It's manufactured in Belgium. And then our regulator is the first to approve it. It is properly a multinational approach.
Yes, I'm really proud of the science. You know, I've always believed that we would get to this moment. It may have felt a long way off at times and uncertain, but I've always believed that the science would come through. And as you say, it's global science, essentially.
I want to play a little clip from William Shakespeare, who's just said his first words. Let's take a listen to this.
Phil, to be patient number 2.
Groundbreaking, I think. It could make a difference to our lives from now on, couldn't it? The start of changing our lives and our lifestyle. It's a precaution, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it will be a precaution.
And I guess it's been tough for you, being at home and being locked down. And
we've been virtually locked down. My wife has managed to get out occasionally to the local shop.
I mean, just simple words there, reacting it. You're quite emotional by that.
Well, it's been such a tough year for so many people, and there's William Shakespeare putting it so simply for everybody that, we can get on with our lives, and there's still a few months to go. I've still got this worry that we can't blow it now, Piers. We've still got to get the vaccine to millions of people, and so we've got to keep sticking by the rules.
You're quite emotional about that.
Well, it's just, it's been such a tough year for so many people, and there's William Shakespeare. It's been such a tough year for so many people. It's been such a tough year for so many people.
Mainstream media is absolutely going crazy. The government is going crazy. Big Pharma is going crazy because everybody's excited, and a lot of Americans are going crazy because St. Fauci actually took the Big Pharma jab. No questions are being asked by fake stream media. Everybody's covering this. Fox News is covering it. ABC, CBS, NBC, MSLSD. Everybody's covering it. So you got to ask yourself a question, Americans. Do you know that St. Fauci took the jab? The answer, if you're honest with yourself, you have to answer, I don't know. I don't know if he actually took the Moderna mRNA jab or the Pfizer jab. You don't know if he took saline. You really don't. I don't either. But the question is, why does mainstream media not ask the question? St. Fauci, how many shares of stock in Moderna do you have? That'd be a really good question for mainstream media. Do they ask it? Hey, Dr. Fauci, do you own stock in Pfizer? How about Johnson & Johnson? How about Inovio? How about Moderna? Do you own any stock in that? Check this out.
And here comes Dr. Fauci now. He, like everyone else, will have to answer the questionnaire about his health. And then he presumably will be asked why he is getting the vaccine today. Let's listen in.
So many in our nation are saying, if Dr. Fauci gets the vaccine, I'm going to get the vaccine. So tell us a little bit of why it's important.
You know what's sad about that? It's true. A lot of people are saying that. They're saying if Dr. Fauci gets it, if Alex Azar gets it, if Collins, who's Dr. Fauci's boss, if he gets it, if Mike Pence gets it, if the president or Kamala Harris or Joe Biden, if they get it, I'll get it. What kind of lunacy is that? Or let me just ask it this way. Is that lunacy or is that rational, logical thinking?
Well, for me, it's important for two reasons. One is that I'm an attending physician here on the staff at the National Institutes of Health Clinical Center. And so I do see patients, but as important or more important is as a symbol to the rest of the country that I feel extreme confidence in the safety and the efficacy of this vaccine, and I want to encourage.
If there's extreme confidence, then why are we going to have, and you'll see it here in a second when he gets the jab, why do we have preloaded syringes? How could they assure us that this wasn't saline solution? How can they assure us that this actually is the same jab that every other American and everybody else in the world is going to get? There is no assurance. If you believe it, that's all it is a belief. It is not a knowing, it's a belief.
Everyone who has the opportunity to get vaccinated so that we could have a veil of protection over this country that would end this pandemic.
Translation, we will not have a veil of protection over this country or the world unless you bow down and submit to and roll up your sleeves for Big Pharma. That is the translation. There it goes. Supposedly it's in right there. And supposedly the Big Pharma VAXX has been delivered into the system of St. Fauci. Now, for the cliffhanger, and I haven't played it yet, but I will shortly, notice which arm St. Fauci gets the jab in. This is his left arm. Your right, his left arm. That's called a photo op. That's called PR, public relations. That's called, in some circles, propaganda. Propagandizing for Big Pharma, for Moderna, for Pfizer.
What are we dealing with here? You're the father of public relations.
What we're dealing with really is the concept that people will believe me more if you call me doctor.
Oh, I see.
Now watch this. I just want to show you, and this is why I made a big deal out of it, going into his left arm. Watch what he does.
I felt a little bit achy, but nothing to be bothering or distracting me. Went to bed last night, had a good night's sleep. Woke up this morning. The only thing I have is just a little bit of a soreness in the arm. Otherwise, I'm doing really well.
All right. Did you pick that up? First, I want to point this out. Notice that all the writing is not reversed. It's not transposed. It's not backwards. This says NIH. The writing facing the camera is in the proper order. The writing facing the camera for the background of where St. Fauci got his Moderna jab, but notice that the writing is right side up. It's not inverted. So this definitely is his left shoulder. But did you notice what he did as he's facing the camera over here? Watch this. What did he do?
Nothing to be bothering or distracting me. Went to bed last night, had a good night's sleep. Woke up this morning. The only thing I have is just a little bit of a soreness in the arm.
He has currently, present tense, a soreness in the arm. Which arm did he pat? He patted his right arm, not his left arm. If you were sore, this is, and again, this is just a question. If you were truly sore and you were being honest about your soreness, wouldn't you pat the arm that's sore from the jab?
You'll never guess who cares about your kids.
Hopefully within a few months, we'll be able to tell children what I know we'll be able to say. The vaccine is safe and effective in you, and we're anxious to get you vaccinated. So just hang in there, a couple of more months, and we'll be in good shape.
Will the shot help everything go back to normal so we can play with our friends again?
And I'll bet you that after you get vaccinated, when vaccines become available for children, you're going to say, you know, it wasn't that bad at all. I'll guarantee. We want to get as many people as possible to get vaccinated.
The time to wink at ignorance is over. The life of your children means nothing to them. And if you don't figure that out, it's going to be you who's responsible. And rest assured, if you do things their way, your child will end up with some sort of disability or even dead. Ignorance is a choice, and believing known liars, as they lie to you, is inexcusable. There's simply no excuse for it at this late date. It's not that you couldn't have known, it's that you didn't want to know. You just stuck your fingers in your ears, you drowned out all the evidence around you, and you said, oh, I can't know nothing. How am I supposed to know? You don't know anything? If you're a Christian and you read your Bible and you still can't see through the devil and his schemes, then there's something wrong. There is something wrong. And that might be the first place to start, getting on your knees before Almighty God and begging for him to give you his mind so you can see, because it's there to be seen. This kind of reminds you of Madeleine Albright asked about the death of thousands of Iraqi children due to U.S. sanctions following the Gulf War. Listen to her answer.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it. We think the price is worth it.
One of the main reasons for the decision to push millions more into Tier 4 in England is the rate of new infections, with fears that this is being driven by the new variant of the virus. But this afternoon, the Health Secretary revealed that 2 cases of yet another variant have been detected in the UK. This one was first discovered in South Africa. Tonight, the government said it was temporarily stopping flights from there from 9 a.m. tomorrow. Our health correspondent Sophie Hutchinson reports.
South Africa, where another new variant of coronavirus is causing alarm. Scientists say initial evidence suggests it's more infectious than other versions of the virus, and doctors are reporting more young people who are seriously ill.
This new variant is highly concerning because it is yet more transmissible, and it appears to have mutated further than the new variant that's been discovered in the UK.
And this new mutant strain, according to what they're sharing, spreads faster than the other. And now they don't even know if the quote-unquote vaccine will work on it, which leads me to believe that a bigger money grab is coming. For you see, now they're going to need COVID vaccine 2.0. It's coming.
We have word out of the UK now that many people have tried to escape the wrath of this lockdown, fleeing the country before this Tier 4 restriction went into place. Last night at midnight, everything started to go into motion for the folks in the UK. They're saying they're asking the public to not travel to Kent ports or other routes to France after this announcement. This could remain in effect until Easter, they say. We have 16 million Britons now required to stay at home, and tens of thousands trying to scramble to get out of the capital late Saturday night. You can see them here trying to catch trains, buses, flights, cabs, whatever, to get out of the region. Now, they're saying that Boris Johnson made this bombshell announcement introducing this Tier 4 restriction in London and southwest England to mitigate the spread of what they're calling a new strain of this virus. This has sparked traffic jams, crowded terminals, and has become really chaotic. Other countries have followed suit in making announcements connected to this. But what has begun here is they have rolled out that there is a new strain that is going all over the place and causing hell. And because people don't want to get locked down, they're running. They're not running because of the strain that was announced. They're running because they don't want to be locked down.
Boris Johnson's government is now under intense pressure on 3 fronts. The new variant of coronavirus is spreading rapidly. Dozens of countries have banned travel from the UK, and Britain is still set to leave the EU at the end of the transition period without a deal in 11 days' time. Now, during the day, more than 40 countries banned flights from the UK, or they imposed greater restrictions, and a French ban on some freight lorries is due to last 48 hours, leading to long queues on the roads of Kent to the port of Dover.
You shall not pass. Travel's blocked. Instead of trucks flowing, stuffed with Christmas parcels and supplies, the motorway's a car park, with truckers stuck.
This is my home, my bed.
Gordon's cab will be his bedroom, living room and kitchen for the next couple of days.
What do? Just have to sit it out, hopefully. They get their act together and let us go home.
Colin got stuck at Dover, but has now made it back to the depot.
So I'll be able to get home for Christmas, but a lot of these people that are sitting on the M20 are not going to get home for Christmas.
The French border closed late last night. Dozens of other countries are telling Brits to stay at home.
Should Parliament be recalled?
And ministers here are grappling with a new variant of the coronavirus that's hitting our health, our businesses and trade with the outside world. Emergency meetings have been taking place all day. But the high risk at home is increasingly clear.
I think it is likely that this will grow in numbers of the variant across the country, and I think it's likely, therefore, that measures need to be increased in some places in due course, not reduced.
France, Spain, Denmark, the Czech Republic and dozens of others have banned UK travellers, but a decision from President Macron about opening the border for freight may not come till lunchtime, although late-night conversations have been taking place. From isolation, Macron told his cabinet a problematic mutation of the virus in the UK meant exceptional measures were needed to control the border. The longer the ban goes on, the more damage and disruption it does. The government spent months rehearsing for this kind of emergency, but not because of the pandemic, but because of what might happen with Brexit.
The location of that.
A border control centre had already been set up to manage the possible chaos, because in 10 days' time, how we trade with the rest of the continent will change dramatically anyway. But just because officials have practised in theory doesn't make the practice any less painful.
This is now a real emergency.
The disease is accelerating aggressively, and even though it only affects a small proportion of freight, other countries' reaction to that is creating disruption. And before too long, more of the country could be under even tighter restrictions. Even despite the turbulent times we've all become accustomed to, tonight the government is grappling with a crisis on many fronts. Finding a way round is not straightforward. As the disease tightens its grip and the very end of the year approaches, political and practical problems now collide.
Where is your breaking point? Where is your line in the sand? When do you say enough?